Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
This is a Monday.com ad. The same Monday.com designed for every team. The same Monday.com with built-in AI, scaling your work from day one. The same Monday.com with an easy and intuitive setup. Go to Monday.com and try it for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, we have a new podcast for you. A very, very exciting story, a tragic story. We were introduced to this woman from a good friend of ours, Cheryl Mack McCullum, who we do a lot of work with. And we have to tell this story. I think this is just an amazing story. We want to welcome Alison Duiker to this podcast. And we're going to be telling her story, which is, I would say it's an odyssey. It's a true crime odyssey that you went through, Alison. I mean, we've been speaking for weeks, preparing for all of this. And, but why don't you just tell us a little bit first tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are today.
Sure. So today, I am a special education teacher. I'm in my 26th year. I have been working with kindergarten and first grade predominantly for the last about 8 years. Love my job. Very happy there and very much feel called there. Many years of my life, I was blessed by teachers. And it's hard, I think, not hard, but I think teachers don't realize what an impact they have on a child like me. I mean, I am truly who I am today because of the teachers along the way who took an interest in me. And I was the student who worked really hard to get my apple on the tree so I'd get a snack on Friday, So all those little things that you do, I am who I am because of all of those incentives. So I am a proud teacher. I am a mom. I am married and have 3 children. My husband is absolutely amazing. And we have 3 children, a boy and 2 girls, and they're very, very involved in sports and drama and band and all kinds of things, which I love. I'm very, very proud. And I do believe a lot of my therapy is like reliving the childhood I didn't and couldn't have through my children. I'm just so happy to be that soccer mom driving around.
Well, I think, Alison, that's why this story is so important for people to hear, because so many people get stuck in the quagmire of being a victim and having tragic things happen to them that they can't see past that. And I think why we wanted you to explain who you are today is because of where you've been. And I think that many people would have crumbled going through the things that you went through. It's an extraordinary tale. Like Rob said, it's an odyssey. And it's also the strength of the human spirit. And I think that you're going to be a role model for people to understand that when tragic things happen, there is a way out and there is a way to get justice and there is a way to build a good life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that, when I view, in the rear view mirror, so to speak, all of this that happened in my past, it is my past. And I kind of got to a point through enough therapy that I could deal with, those demons, that I realized that I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to be a positive influence on others. I wanted my story to actually offer hope and support and courage to others. There's so many different facets of the story. I truly want my story to offer love and light to whoever needs it in whatever way. And that's also part of why I wrote a book. In 2023, I released I think it was 2022, I released a memoir about my mother's story, about my story, and just the theme throughout is resilience. And now as an adult, I get to choose how I live my life. And those things happen to me, but they're not who I am.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And I know that we're being kind of cryptic about Alison's story here. So I want you to just, for our audience, just give us the headline of what you went through. You don't have to go into because we're going to go through this very deep because it's been a lifelong story for you. And most of the true crime stories and the victims that we have on here and trying to find out what happened to their loved one or someone they knew or what happened to them. There's really no answers, but yours, you have some answers. And so, which is amazing. So we're going to kind of go back and kind of diagram it all from when you were a little girl. So just for our audience's purposes, just give us the headline of what we're about to talk about.
Sure. So I was a child of 2 deaf adults. So that's a really important piece to the story. I did a lot of interpreting for my family, and what you call a child of a deaf adult is CODA, and it's CODA, which is child of deaf adult. And there is a mannerism, a responsibility, a way in which you behave. And that's all due to being the firstborn child, often, of a deaf family where you speak for them. And I, at the age of 3, I was signing for them and speaking for them. And that was always my role. And I feel like, also firstborn children have that, sense about them, but it's such a bigger, broader responsibility when you're talking about children of deaf adults, being their ears. If I'm not with them, they're not able to effectively speak. And, then it's frustrating and so on. But so that's how I started my life. And, we'll go into it more later, but it's a very important piece to the story. Just the quick general summary is that at the age of 5, my mother became a missing person. And I say that frankly now. However, it was years of fighting and arguing, and my father had a criminal record and all kinds of horrible things that he had done, had been arrested for, crimes committed, and things that he got out of because he was deaf and people felt bad for him. And, he would say, "Oh, I didn't understand. Oh, and a lot of things, ways in which he used his deafness to get out of trouble. But to fast forward to the night that my mother disappeared, she told him that night that she was leaving him. They had already been separated. They were separated in October of 1981. And she only let him come back because there were 2 young children, myself, and I had a younger brother. We were 3 years apart. So I was 5 and he was 3. And she allowed my father to come back because it was the holidays. We're talking about the snow belt, horrible, snow drifts and awful weather. That particular night, they were closing down highways because they couldn't keep up with the snow. It was a blizzard. And my mother told my father that she had enough. I'm sorry, let me back up and say that she allowed him to come and stay because the weather was bad. And she didn't want to take away the holiday for the children or for him, understanding and respecting that he's still the father. And she told him that he could come back. Now, he had moved in with his parents because they were separated, but she told him he could come back, spend the night, get through the holidays, and then he would have to leave. That in no way was this a reconciliation. This was just for the holidays and for the children's sake. And that did not, unfortunately, work out the way my mother wanted. after the holidays, he refused to leave and said, "This is my house. I'm not leaving. These are my kids. I'm not leaving." And she knew that she was going to have to be the one to leave because he wasn't going to leave. She was planning to take the children, myself and my brother, and move 4 hours away to be near her sister. And they kind of talked and planned about how they would raise their children together. My aunt had a son, and that was her plan. That night, she had told my father that I am done. I want a divorce, where there's no getting back together. And that night she disappeared and was never seen or heard from again for almost 45 years. And all of that time, my father claimed that she left with another man, that she left in the middle of the night, and that he didn't know where she was, but she was off with a man somewhere. And,
Okay, let me have a question for you right now.
Sure.
Prior to the divorce, or your mom deciding to wanting divorce, what was their marital situation? Was it just arguing? Was it physical violence? I mean, can you give us
how long had they been together?
Yeah, and how long they've been together?
So they married in 71 or 72. I'd have to look that date up. I'm sorry, I can't remember whether it was 71 or 72, but they married a few years before I was born, and I was born in 75. So I think they were married, it must have been 72. So they were married for a few years. Then I came along 2.5 years later, my brother came along, and they did a lot of arguing. I don't have like physical or like actual memories of physical violence, other than some things that are starting to come back now that I haven't had in the past. This is a whole segment in itself, but I did do hypnotism, and I was blown away by how that worked.
Oh,
and
yeah. Amazing what you uncover in that.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole segment itself.
But
But
I just want to just paint the picture of this. So
Sure.
they were both deaf.
yes.
Did they meet when they were young? Were they in a community of deaf people? How did they meet, and how did they end up getting together in the first place?
So they had two very different upbringings. My father went to a school for the deaf in Pittsburgh. So he was sent 2.5 hours away from his family where he lived. It was a boarding school, so to speak. And he grew up basically at the boarding school, but would come home, on holidays and things like that. And my mother had a very different upbringing where they were very strong, family centered, strong connections. They always got together. They all lived near each other. They're still like that now. And my grandmother found out that she was deaf when she was, I want to say 2 or 3. And my mother found out that, I'm sorry, I lost track of my thoughts.
That's okay.
My grandmother found out that my mother was deaf because my great grandmother said to her, "There is something wrong with her. Like, she is not hearing you. Take her to the doctor." And they went, and it was some sort of malfunction in utero. Like, it was deafness that happened in utero, with some sort of birth defect that happened. However, my grandmother's, mentality was, so she's going to have to work a little harder. She will help her, and she'll figure out how to do it. And she's going to be productive and successful. And she's going to do all the things that everybody else does. She just might have to do it a little differently. And I love that because that totally ties into my, special ed background. And oh my gosh, before special ed was even a thing. Like,
well, I mean, that's like amazing that you ended up in special ed like that at that time, coming from that kind of stock, that kind of family value of no matter what your handicap is, no matter what you're suffering from or what your victimization is in this life, you're going to overcome it. And that's it. and
sure.
you're going to do the best that you can. And I love that, because it is a testament to your spirit. And if that's how your family was, if that's how your family
Right.
was, and it's in
And
your,
it was before special ed laws. Like nothing
Right.
was mandated.
no,
That was a time that you were encouraged by the doctors to send them away somewhere else. And
Yeah.
my grandmother was like, absolutely not. That is not happening. So she went to a public school, and there were actually like 4 or 5 deaf students also in her high school graduating class. Like they kind of moved together. So, I mean, it was lucky that at that time they did set up a special ed class that wasn't a special ed class, before there was such a thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
But so that was her upbringing. And you asked me, like, how did they meet each other? So they're from the same general area. So where my mother grew up is the Sagertown, Meadville, Pennsylvania area, and my father grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania. So they are about 40 minutes apart from each other. And in Erie, the city of Erie, there is a deaf club that's like a social club where you can be hearing, but mostly deaf or hard of hearing families, individuals go there and they socialize. And like it's a place where they know that they're going to be understood, and they have so much fun. They dance, they play games, they do bingo, they do, so many fun things. And they met at the deaf club.
so they were young.
They were young. They were in their 20s, not young, but they met, in their young adult lives. And to go back to my father, he was not born deaf. There was a really bad car accident where he was, just a young 2, 3, somewhere in there, and he was sitting in the front seat of the car in between his parents, and they swerved to miss in the wintertime, swerved to miss another car, and the car like spun, and he fell off the seat before seatbelts. He fell off the seat, and his head got jammed under the father's foot, and it did some sort of permanent damage in his ears, causing him to be hard of hearing. Not completely deaf, but hard of hearing. I couldn't tell you medically how bad that is. I don't know, the extent of that. I have my questions, because there are plenty of times in my youth I would, call my brother a swear word or a bad name, and I got backhanded. So I'm like, now, come on. Like,
So
I don't know how he heard that.
Yeah. So you didn't know the level of which you could hear, but he could hear something.
Oh, yes. Yes. So there were
Interesting.
times that I thought, how did he know what I said? Because they can read lips, but I knew enough to not make my lips apparent to him, when I was saying things I shouldn't. But she was completely deaf.
So as a child, it must have been a lot to deal with, to be the voice and the ears for your parents.
Yeah.
As a young little child, 3, 4, 5 years old, I mean, that's a big burden.
That's a parenting. You're basically a parent.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at that, the role that a coda takes on is an adult role. I mean, to communicate at a super young age, it's absolutely, a huge responsibility. But I will also say, I mean, the image of like a lobster boiling, like you don't even know what's happening, because it's your norm. It's the life you're living. So you don't know any different. You don't know that it's unusual until you're not in that situation anymore.
Right.
So how early did you learn how to sign language?
Immediately. Like they were signing to me, and, people do it now to give an opportunity for communication when kids, babies, infants are super young, because they don't have the vocal ability to do that yet. I mean, people will say milk, more. They teach those things to young infants because it's a language you can pick up before you can speak.
Wow.
So tell us about your mom. What was she like?
Amazing. She, it's really neat, because through the process of meeting people who knew her, I've really come to learn so much about her. I lost her when I was 5, and because it was such a traumatic time, I feel like there's a ton of repressed memory and things. I have very few actual memories of her that were my own memories. There are a lot of memories that were created based on stories I was told or experiences people told me about her, and I that again, that's probably a whole nother topic, but I did acquire pictures and videos that I never knew existed recently. And, watching them, I see her dancing. She was so fun. And you can see in the video clips her dancing and people like gravitating in like she's a magnet and people are like attracted. She was fun. You could always see her smiling and laughing. And people tell me she was the light of the room. People just wanted to talk to her. And, when someone speaks a different language than you, there's a discomfort there because you don't know how to talk to them. So oftentimes, I think if you don't know the language, you shy away from someone who you think you can't talk to. And that was not the case with her. People wanted to figure out how to talk to her. They would approach her and just have them read her lips or find some way or write in a notebook and then show her. And people sought ways to communicate with her rather than shy away from her because she was different or she had a disability, because she drew people in. She was just really, from what I'm told, that she was just a light and friendly and fun. And
Well, it sounds like your great grandmother kind of did that for her. She threw her
yeah,
right. She says, "You're not going to be different. You're going to have to work harder, but you're not going to be different." So
right.
I think that early impression that
Yeah.
she felt like she's not different, she just has a little bit. She has to work a little harder. Probably really kind of impacted her in a big way, and didn't stunt her personality.
No. And you would think, she's deaf. You would think that anything that has to do with sound would not be a part of her world. Well, she loved music. She loved dancing. My family uh, was very into dancing, and they would put music on and dance right there in the living room. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a dance instructor at an Arthur Murray dance studio, and my mother was his dance partner for lessons.
That's cute.
Isn't that so crazy?
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that's amazing that, she's able to overcome that handicap and not use it as a crutch, right? Just like you're saying.
I'm sure she could feel the music better than a hearing person because it's like
Absolutely.
really the rhythm. Like the words don't distract, you don't hear them. Just the rhythm and all of the basics of music she loved.
Then your father, he was probably jealous of that, I would imagine.
So there are videos that I just acquired where you see her dancing and talking and people approaching her, and then you see him like leaning against a counter at the side of the room, like kind of just sitting there. And I do think that he was not outgoing like she was. He probably had a harder time getting along with people, talking to people, and dare I say, he probably didn't even have the interest in communicating that she did. She wanted to be enmeshed in every environment, and I'm not so sure he did.
Interesting.
And that
Opposites attract.
Well, then they attack.
Yeah.
And then, that's the thing. So it sounds like they weren't married that long, 10 years before things started to dry.
Yeah.
And so what led to her leaving or having him leave in the first place? Do you even know?
So there is a long list of crimes that he committed. My mother's side, they were very involved in the fire department. It's a volunteer fire department and lots of community members were involved. And the community really knew my mother's family. So my father, not a new behavior, just continued the same mistakes that he made in his younger days that my mother had no idea about, because, in 70, when she met him, 71, there wasn't the internet. Like there weren't ways to find out about people like we can now. And I don't even think it was even a thought. Probably you don't research people before you go out with them, back in that day. And I don't think she actually knew about his crimes, and those crimes became a major embarrassment to her. And when he was a volunteer fireman, he stole tools from garages, broke into garages and stole tools, got caught, paid a fine because he's deaf and people felt bad for him. So he'd pay a fine, done. Then he broke into the fire department that he was volunteering at, stole, some things from there. Lots of car break-ins, burglaries, breaking into homes, and he kept getting caught. And it was embarrassing to my mother because this was a community that her family was very well known, very respected. And here, he is, committing these crimes against people who are her friends, her family friends. And it was embarrassing. He, when my mother was in the hospital giving birth to my brother, he was in jail for staging a robbery at a bar he was working at part-time. He was the closer and stole the money from the register and money from a back room and shot a hole through his hat, and then broke the glass door. Like it was like a wooden door with like glass windows. So how he got caught was he broke the glass from the inside out and told them that some man came in, held him up at gunpoint, shot at him. He let him take the money because he didn't want to be hurt, and held on to that story until they started to say, okay, so you're wearing a hat and there's a hole in your head, but not a hair on your head is scratched or shows any sign, that you've been fired at.
That's a tall tale.
Huge, and oh, by the way, you broke the glass from the inside out, not the other way. And so eventually he came clean and he went to jail for that one. So that wasn't just a fine. He went to jail, and my mother went into labor with my brother at that time. Now they let him out. This is what I mean. Like it's this little county jail, and they knew that she was going into labor. So they let him out, let him go to the hospital and be there when she was born. And my aunt tells this story, my mother's sister, that she's in labor and my father gets out of jail. They let him go to the hospital. And my father kind of corners my aunt, my mother's sister, my Aunt Glennie, and says, you got to tell Lonnie to take me back. Like, tell her that we need to be a family. And here my mother's giving birth, and she's like, what do you get? I need to be there for my sister. This is not the time. But she did, because she wanted to raise children with their father. And that was a time when you didn't get divorced. And I'm sure that she made every effort to try to mend things. But the bottom line is his behavior wasn't changing. He was becoming very obsessed with her, was constantly badgering her about, where were you? Where have you been? Who were you talking to? Accusing her, very paranoid about anything that she did. And the truth is, she was always a very outgoing, friendly person. So that wasn't different before they were married or when they were married. But that behavior is something that was very suspect for him. And he would just keep accusing her. They'd argue constantly about it. And my hunch, so I struggle with this because my aunt swears that she was not physically harmed in their marriage, meaning domestic violence in a physical manner. And I wouldn't know, and neither would she, because she lived 4 hours away for a period of that time. But I just can't believe in the pattern of domestic violence and what her demise was, that he just all of a sudden that night was the only time that he was ever physically violent with her. Arguing, I remember, and yelling and that kind of thing, but I don't honestly remember physical violence, but
Yeah, but you
I
were also
believe that it happened.
How old were you at that time?
So she went missing at 5. So
Yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't remember it.
You wouldn't remember that. You wouldn't remember that.
No.
I want to back up just a little bit. Did your father like commit these crimes because he wasn't making enough money doing the job that he was, or was this just something that was an adrenaline rush for him that he just couldn't? He had the proclivity to just do stuff like that?
I think a little of both, to be honest. He liked to spend money. He liked toys and tools, and he liked the finer things that he didn't make enough money to purchase. So I think he always felt entitled to those things, that he should just have it. So I think the stealing and the burglary, those behaviors came from his
Kayak gets my flight, hotel, and rental car right. So I can tune out travel advice that's just plain wrong.
Bro, Skycoin. Way better than points.
Never fly during a Scorpio full moon.
Just tell the manager you'll sue. Instant room upgrade.
Stop taking bad travel advice. Start comparing hundreds of sites with Kayak and get your trip right. Kayak. Got that right.
You tell yourself, no one wants your college-era band tees. But on Depop, people are searching for exactly what you've got. You once paid a small fortune for them at merch stands. Now, a teenager who calls them vintage will offer that same small fortune back. Sell them easily on Depop. Just snap a few photos and we'll take care of the rest. Who knew your questionable music taste would be a money-making machine? Your style can make you cash. Start selling on Depop, where taste recognizes taste.
Where is Daredevil? I'm right here. Don't miss the return of Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again.
So what's next?
I feel liberated.
We're gonna take this city back.
Over medicated.
In an all-new season, now streaming only on Disney+.
They're hunting us. It's time we started hunting them.
I can work with that.
This should be tons of fun.
Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, now streaming only on Disney+.
Now, this is just my opinion. My take is that I think he felt slighted in life because he was deaf and felt like he was justified in stealing from people who had more than him because it wasn't fair, kind of thing, and that I'm not sure that it was like the thrill of it. I think it was more entitlement and more like, well,
Revenge.
you have plenty, so I'm going to take some of what you have because I want it.
Right.
Revenge against the world.
Yes,
So,
very.
What was the final straw for your mom to finally say you have to go? I don't want you staying here anymore. Do you know?
I don't know specifically, but I know they fought a lot, and I think that it was the constant badgering every time she came home of where were you, who were you with, and I believe through conversations with my aunt, she just wanted a better life for the kids and didn't want the kids, myself, to grow up thinking this is how, people, relate to each other, and that she was very unhappy and that it continued to be a daily thing.
Mm-hmm.
When he came back, it was only supposed to be for the holidays. Now, there could have been an opportunity to mend things had he left as he was told to do so, that this is not a getting back together. Let's work on things. But he didn't want that. He was stubborn, he was arrogant, and he was like, my way. And because he was forceful, he wouldn't, honor her wishes, and then just continued to argue with her and accuse her of things that weren't true. It made that possible reconciliation not even close to a possibility.
So this time when he came back was like the early 80s?
Yes.
So
81.
So he came back for the holidays. There's a snowstorm. You kids are getting ready for Christmas, I would take it. Yeah.
So he came back right before Christmas, and only because of the holiday.
Mhm.
So, you know, the specific day he came back, I'm not positive, but I want to say it was like Christmas Eve or something like that.
And then when did your mother disappear?
So the night of January 6th. So it was January 7th that she was reported missing, not by my father, by my grandfather.
Okay, so what is your last memory of your mom?
So that's an interesting question, because now that things are unfolding and with the case, I'm starting to remember more things. I would say that my own memory, that I'm sure was my own, that I remember, I was maybe 4 or 5. I remember her curling her hair. She was, in the bathroom getting ready, probably for work or something, and she had this long golden blonde hair, and I just was sitting, like gazing at her, watching her curl her hair, and I was just in awe of how beautiful she was. And I reached up to the sink and grabbed the curling iron with my hand, which is probably why I remember it. But so I burnt myself pretty good. But I just remember being in awe of just how pretty she was. And I remember that now because it was literally burned into me.
Yeah, that's a good.
So the night that your mom disappeared from your house,
Mm-hmm.
do you recall the next morning when you woke up what happened, or is it still free?
There are pieces and parts that are starting to make more sense, like, oh, this happened and then this happened. That particular night, he woke up. Like, do you want me to go into the
Tell us
okay
tell us that night what happened and how this all came about. And
sure. So he
your dad.
Yes. So his name is Clinton Rogers, but he always went by Bud. So, I might refer to him as Bud or my father, but Bud was what his nickname that he went by. So my mother went to work the morning of January 6th. My father went to work. Now, we had always gone to a babysitter whose name was Sandy, who was my mother's like best friend. She was also deaf, but had a hearing child, and she took care of my brother and I when she went to work. And we went to Sandy's house. Sandy and my mother had talked a lot about how unhappy she was, how unhappy my mother was. So Sandy knew things were not good with their relationship, and she knew that my mother wanted to leave him. But nothing was actually communicated to Sandy about a plan. At that point, my mother did not say, I'm leaving, I'm interested in someone else, I'm going to leave with someone else. Like, no plan was discussed. And Sandy saw her daily because of the kids. So she would have known that. Anyway, so they went to work. My mother came and my mother went to her father's house and said, he's never going to leave. I have to get away. I'm going to have to leave, but I don't have money. I don't have the funds to do that. And my grandfather said, all I have is $60. It was three $20 bills. And that's important to this story. Whoops. All I have is three $20 bills. And he gave it to her. And he said, we'll help you. This is all I have right now. We'll help you. We're here for you. My mother thanks him, and at that point, I'm sure she's thinking of a plan of how she's going to get away. I need water. Hold on. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
And $60 back then was a lot.
It was. Today it's not that much, but
Probably
it was a lot then.
$200-$300.
Yeah. So, after hearing from my grandfather, she went and picked us up from the babysitter, took us home. I'm sure that, she got dinner ready. My father comes home. So he had worked, she had worked, kids are home, we're all eating. And, I don't know specifically, but I can just see and imagine that he was again, where were you? Who were you talking to? Well, she went to her father's house to talk to her father. And, he was probably saying, oh, sure, you were with someone else. That same type of argument was happening. And, they were arguing. And we were put in bed. So, I'm sure they did baths and all those things and put us in bed. Now, as a coda, like my job is, to be there for them, to communicate for them, not with each other, obviously, but there's also this responsibility of like, I have to take care of them. You talked about it being an adult role. I very much felt like I was caring for them.
Of course.
So when they'd fight, I would be like, stop, 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 and I would try to, help them get along. I felt like that was my job. So we got put in bed. I hear them arguing. So I kept coming out. And this is one of the things that I remembered, but I didn't know where it fit in the memory. Like I remembered getting out of my bed and going and trying to distract them from arguing and trying to get them to stop. And then putting me back in bed. And then I got up again after hearing them argue. And I had those memories trying to get them to stop, but I wasn't sure it was that night. I kind of, that could have been any night. And Cheryl McCollum set me up with a hypnotist. And it was during that hypnotism that I was able to go step by step through events. And then the memories that I had that I wasn't really sure where they fit, I could time order them like, oh, then that happened. I remember that, but I didn't know where it fit. Or I thought it happened that night, but I wasn't entirely sure. Like they fought all the time. It could have been any night. So that hypnotism really helped me to understand that, yes, it did happen that night. I was able to time order those memories. So I kept going out, trying to get them to stop. My father took me. I remember him being like angry. And this is one of those things that I remembered, but I wasn't sure it was that night. So my father put me back in bed and said, do not get up again. And I was scared. So he shut the door. And I remembered like getting up and sitting at the door so I could hear, and just like crouching down low against the door, listening to them fight. And I knew, I was going to get a spanking or something, if I got out again. So I didn't dare do that. I could hear them arguing. And this is the part where I didn't quite understand what had happened until I heard my father's confession. And when I heard what he had said and the order of events, I knew that I was listening when he took her life. And I was crouched at that door, holding my knees and hearing them argue and fight. And then I didn't hear anything. So at the time, I thought, oh, well, they stopped fighting. How would I know what they were doing? And it just got quiet. And I just assumed that they must have stopped fighting or maybe, went to separate rooms, whatever. I also remember hearing a door. So we lived upstairs and then going down the stairs. but I didn't dare come out because I knew that I'd be in big trouble. And then the next thing you know, I just crawled back in bed, I guess, and woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning when my father was telling me to get up and help him get my brother dressed, that my mother left in the middle of the night with another man. And, I didn't understand what was going on. Like, it didn't make any sense, but I helped get my brother ready. And he, carried us down to the car and put us in the car, took us to the babysitter. I will say that, again, that hypnotism helped me to understand lots of things. And one was, I remember him holding Aaron down the stairs and had me by the hand. And there was so much snow, like huge drifts of snow. And I noticed that when he was putting me he drove a 4-wheel drive Bronco, when he put my brother in and then, helped me get in. And I remember looking and going, oh my gosh, there's so much snow. And looking at my mother, she drove a Ford Mustang, and the back of it was cleared off. So, when you clear off snow, there's like a big edge, and then you can see how much snow there was. And I remember seeing that edge of snow on the car and thinking, wow, there's so much snow. And then, so when I get in the car, again, before seatbelts or before, they were law for sure, I'm up on my knees looking out. I can't believe how much snow there is. And he yelled at me and told me to sit down. And I was like, oh, okay. Now, any other time that wouldn't have been something he had done, because, it's not required that you sit in a seat with a seatbelt, all that kind of stuff. But he told me to sit down on my bottom and took us to the babysitter. So, to this day, I wonder, did he put her behind us? Was she behind us that whole drive? I don't know the answer to that.
You mean in the truck?
Yeah. I mean, I really feel like he had to put her somewhere.
Yeah.
So
and
for a while,
he was taking you to the babysitter, and then,
yeah, and then he's got to do something.
Exactly.
Now, my other thought was, did he put her in her own car? Like, is that why the snow was off the car? Like, did he put her in the trunk of her own car to come back and do something?
Oh.
Now, the Bronco was open in the back. I mean, if I was up on my knees and looked back, if she was there, I would have seen something. So was that why he was so adamant that I sit on my bottom? I don't know. Any other time it wouldn't have mattered. So, why then? Questions I don't have answers to, but I've
terrifying, because had you seen something, he might have hurt you too.
True. Yeah. So he took us to the babysitter, and the babysitter was deaf. So at 3 a.m, he's banging on the door, and, people who are deaf have different ways of, functioning. And I'm sure there was a light that was going off saying someone was at the door. I believe she had a dog. The dog was probably waking her up, and she came to the door, and Bud said to her, can you keep the kids? I have to go look for Lonnie. She left with another man. And I can't imagine being her bestie and saying, she did what? She would have known that something was in the works, if that was her plan. And I'm sure that Sandy would have thought she never would have left the kids.
Never, right.
Never, ever.
Snowstorm. She's going to go.
Right,
Leave
right.
Children. What did he do? He just came over and took her? Her car was there.
Right. The car never left.
And her children. I'm going to leave her children.
And she was deaf. Everything was left. Now, she had a hearing aid. So what I'm told is it really didn't work, like, because her level of deafness, but she wore it every day religiously, no matter what, because she wanted even just a little bit of connection to the hearing world. So she never, ever, ever left without her hearing aid. She wore glasses. She didn't have her glasses. She didn't take her purse. She didn't take her car keys. She didn't take her wallet. She, why? All of that was left behind. So back to Sandy. So Sandy's very nervous, like something is not right. Bud goes to work. So I'm sorry, let me back up because there are 3 hours unaccounted for. He dropped us at 3 and shows up at work at 6 a.m. on time. I guess from what I hear, he was never late, ever, not a minute late, ever, always on time or early. And that day he was like 6 minutes late or something like that, like a few minutes late. But the weather was bad. You would assume that, it happens. Everybody's having a hard time getting in. No big deal. But he never told a single person when he went to work that there was a problem at home. Never said my wife's missing. Never said I've got to, I'm worried about my wife. I have to find my wife. I don't know where she is.
Well, that's a huge clue right there.
What kind of job where did he work at that time?
He worked in a foundry that melted metal into like screws and stuff like that.
So like a factory job.
Yes. 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 And never told a soul, never acted like there was a problem at all.
Did he have
he claims
friends?
those 3. Did he what?
Did he have any friends?
No. People have found me on Facebook who knew him then. And they're like, he was creepy. He didn't have any friends. Like, we stayed away from him. He scared people. Like, he wasn't kind, wasn't friendly. His nickname was Bud, but he was no bud of anybody's. So
what the deaf community, did he have any kind of like support from them?
Not really. So I think he had a couple friends that he went to school with, that he still remained friends with, like that he went to high school with. But most of their friends were her friends, or they were friends with them because they wanted to have a relationship with my mother, not necessarily Bud. And a lot of deaf people now who were friends with them then have told me, I put up with Bud because I loved Lonnie. I don't know what she saw in him, so there was a lot of that. He was just so jealous and always arguing with people. And I think, kind of put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth because he was so jealous all the time. Wow.
So, all right. So he goes to work, doesn't tell anybody anything.
Nope.
And so he dropped you guys off. What was this? 6 a.m. he was at work?
Yes. So he dropped us at 3, and his work on, a no snow day is like 15, 20 minutes from where he lived. He drives a 4-wheel drive Bronco, is used to driving in that weather. He's from there. It wouldn't have been, that big of a struggle for him or scare because he's used to that weather, but the roads were bad. So even if it took 3 times the amount of time, 3 hours, he said he was looking for her. Where did you go? Where did you look? I don't know if that's even in the police report because I'm not allowed to see it because it's an open investigation. But, I wonder. So where did he say he went? What did he do? Where did he look? But, I don't know if I'll ever know any of that. But so anyway, he actually returns to the babysitter when he worked a shift to get us. In that time, the babysitter at 3 a.m., she was very nervous when we were dropped off. She knew something wasn't right, but didn't feel like it was appropriate to get a hold of my mother's parents at 3 a.m. because she didn't realize how serious it was. She has a hearing daughter. So in the morning, when it was like an appropriate time to get a hold of them, she tells her daughter to call my grandfather and tell him something's up and what had happened. So instantly my grandfather is, furious and worried. And he calls my great-grandfather, who lived catty corner to where my mother lived. So my mother was renting, my parents were renting like a duplex, and they lived in the upstairs apartment. And literally 100 yards from where their house was, catty corner, was my great-grandparents' home. So if my mother needed something, she would have went there. Their doors were never locked. She was always over there. She had a super close relationship with them. She was named after my great-grandfather. So my great-grandfather's name is Lonene, and they kind of like feminized her name, and her name is Lonene, goes by Lonnie. So she was very close with them. If she needed anything, she would have grabbed us kids and went over there with us. Like, there's no way she would have went somewhere.
And so your father gets this call from your mom's friend, and this was all like prior to that. Your mom had already talked to her dad.
Yes.
Talking about
ask for money.
Ask for money. I'm thinking I'm leaving him. Yep. It's it's not getting good. So I'm sure his antenna was already up.
Oh, for sure. So, and I'm sure he was instantly, worried. So my great-grandfather and my grandfather, my grandfather went over to my great-grandfather's house because they're nearby. And they went over and kicked open the door. Went up to the apartment, and everything was pristine. Beds are made, no dishes in the sink, pillow, like everything was perfect. Now, my mother was a neatnik, she was, everything had its place. But at 3 a.m, he got us dressed and took us, not my mother, but you decided to stop and make the beds? Like, did you feed us? No dishes in the sink? Like, so many odd things. And my grandfather saw that her purse was there, her hearing aid was there, like it's sitting on the dresser, on her dresser, on the top. So it wasn't like hidden. It's where it's what she would have done to get herself ready to go anywhere. She would not have left without them. I mean, half the time my aunt said the batteries didn't even work, and she'd be wearing a hearing aid, and hearing aid batteries will like ring, like an annoying ring.
Yeah.
And she would never know it. And my aunt would be like, your battery's dead. So anyway, she would never leave the house without those. And it was sitting there. So my grandfather calls the police and says, you better get over here, because I'm about to, do something to this man. I don't know where my daughter is. I'm sure she was super worried, or he was super worried. And the police say, well, there's nothing we can do. She's an adult. She has every right to go wherever she chooses to go. Give it some time, and we'll see if she comes home. And he's like, no, you don't understand. If you don't get over here, you're coming over here, because I'm going to assault this man. And, that turned into a whole different reason for them to show up. And they're like, all right, we'll come over. So my father's still at work. My father, goes and picks us up from the babysitter, acted like it was no big deal, brings us home, and walks into the apartment that has my grandfather, my great-grandfather, the police, and he's pissed. Like, why are you in my home? Blah, blah, blah. And the police, are trying to ask him questions. However, the communication barrier worked out, and they ask him to empty his pockets. Now he tells them, oh, she left. She's cheating on me. She left with another man. And they say, okay, can you just empty your pockets for us? And you would think that was protocol, because it could be a potentially dangerous situation, blah, blah, blah. So he empties his pockets, and he pulls out 3 $20 bills.
Oh.
And my grandfather goes nuts and says, I gave that money to Lonnie. Why do you have that money? And he says, well, Lonnie gave it to me to pay a bill.
Okay. Well, that's a perfect place.
No way.
No way.
That's insane.
No way.
But that's the thing with missing persons cases, right? So this is the big problem. What?
Am I allowed to swear?
Of course. You swear.
Okay, good.
So
because I just said that's bullshit.
Yeah, no, you can swear.
It's total bullshit. And I think that's the perfect place to stop this week because this is where this story gets crazy.
I just got chills.
I did too, because it's we've worked on dozens of missing persons cases and it's the same thing over and over again. It's like, well, you know, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway,
The gaslighting.
The gaslighting is just insane.
Sure. Well, then the other thing is there was this bright pink blanket that would be draped over the couch. And my mother won it at some raffle or something or some party. And it was the blanket that was always there for when my aunt came over to play with the kids, whatever, or when she spent the night, she constantly used that blanket to sleep under. So my grandfather said, like, where's that blanket? We're, probably trying to figure out what's different, what's whatever. And he says, Lonnie must have taken it. I don't know. I don't know where it is. And so now we have three $20 bills that were given to Lonnie. All of her stuff is left behind. And there's a missing blanket off the couch that is always there. And all he can say is she left with another man.
Well, even more disturbing is that the police were like, okay, she's not here.
Well,
he's allowed to be gone. Yeah,
exactly. Back then, I mean, even today, it's not even 24 hours. So it's like they're not even going to think about it. You can't even file a missing persons thing at that point. So, but yeah, so it's really back then they wouldn't have. They would figure, oh, this is domestic. This is not worth the paperwork right now. She's probably going to come back. This was like a domestic situation. They got pissed at each other. She left him, and she'll be back soon for her kids.
So I will tell you, based on what you just said, there are little snippets of things that I know from law enforcement accidentally leaking it, that not one picture was taken that night. Not one picture of the crime scene. They didn't look at anything. They didn't survey anything. They didn't check the vehicles. Nothing was done because they were sure that she'd be back.
Yep.
There's nothing in the record.
That, like I said, is the perfect place to end because that's the beginning of
your odyssey.
Yes.
Because every case we've covered that had that some are still unsolved, it starts with police, unfortunately, and we're very pro police, not doing the proper investigation from the get-go.
But also missing persons protocol needs to change.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
That's a whole other issue. But this missing persons protocol that we have now does not work.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it right now with Savannah Guthrie's case.
Yes.
This is a woman who's getting all this attention. God bless her. But look at the millions of people that don't.
Yeah.
And, the protocol has to change. Maybe this case can help do that. Maybe
they didn't wait 24 hours.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. They didn't know, not even.
No, that's what I'm saying. So our goal here is also to kind of get some movement on that as well. But thank you, Allison. It's been wonderful.
Welcome.
I can't wait to hear more.
Can't wait to hear the rest of this amazing story to share with our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And thank you for letting us share your story.
Yeah.
And
stay tuned for next week because we have some more
see you next
with Allison.
week.